have to introduce something like Malay has in Argentina, like a shock therapy, because you need to, all of a sudden, the signals have been distorted so much that you have to just blow it up in order to find the number, the real value of something. Now, it is possible to take this too far, but at the same time, it enables things that we could have never ever imagined before. And this is the idea again of community.
Joe, let's go back to the basics a little bit for people. So, one of my favorite rock groups is Dire Straits, and I love the song "Money for Nothing."
and something else for free.
So it kind of sounds like that. So where does your crypto money come from? So originally, when it's set up, you set up the number of crypto units, crypto coins, whatever. There's a set number. And that's the reason why some people do invest with it, because scarcity, when something becomes more scarce, it typically becomes more valuable. Artwork or whatever, money too as well. Obviously, the United States is pumping money out like crazy. And so the dollar gets less and less because there's more dollars in circulation and it's worth less. That's where inflation comes from. Well, crypto can work the same way, but people do wonder, well, where does it come from then? Well, the way it starts out might be a little bit complex, so I won't go into that too much, other than the mining of crypto is not really money for nothing. It's not free. For one thing, you need to do it on a computer.
Right.
And if you really want to, to mine crypto, you may need lots of computers, which take a lot of energy. So there are people that have these warehouses of computers using tons of electricity to mine crypto, and these computers are just, chomping away, and eventually they'll discover one of the crypto coins that is not yet, that is left untaken. And so that's the way you get it. So it's not really money for nothing. But you also can get it by the scarcity. And so this is the reason why the crypto market goes up and down as well, is, how much money is left, how many crypto coins are left in the market. That does make a difference. Crypto becomes more and less valuable. So, and then finally, I just want to mention El Salvador.
Right.
El Salvador is unique. El Salvador decided they're going to have their entire base of exchange on crypto. Right. And one of the reasons they did that is they have volcanoes that uses heat, where they can have essentially almost free energy. Once they set it up, they can generate energy from these volcanoes.
Like,
and then they can use, that's thermal energy, and they can set up computers that just use this free energy, and they can mine their own crypto as well. So the government can do the part of the mining, plus the fact that you have the individuals in crypto. So there's so many different facets, I think, to the way that crypto works. And kind of cover the basics there.
And Ecuador, had some similar ideas as well. And so, digital currency is something that has been tried, and because it is seen as something as efficient. And just to back off for a minute, and because this is where philosophy is very important, especially when it comes to even ideas like strategy. Again, what is it when we say something? What is a word? A word has a concept in it. And the idea that it's a thought and a concept that aligns to the physical world, that thought and concept allows you to then shape the physical world, right? So that is what it is. It's a signal that aligns to reality. And so now you're able to do that same very thing with this type of information, and that you're starting to be able to have a new level of granularity into the signal itself. And you're talking about everybody's transactions with those things.
Right.
So that becomes extremely powerful. and its ability to. Now, imagine throwing an AI on top of that. That's kind of crazy.
Oh,
but I mean, yeah, not for anything, but that is, that is kind of creepy. But nonetheless, and I did a recent meeting on the idea of, well, similarly, it has a little bit to do with this, is the idea of memory. Well, you're never, now we're going to remember everything. And, there are implications to that, both good and bad. So, I mean, fundamentally, this is why philosophy is important. Is like, what is it that we're actually doing? What is it? Because now you're seeing these things then manifest themselves in reality. Yep. So, I think that this is where now people are reimagining even how economies could work. What is the most efficient things? But I do think that the most important part of this is to recognize over history what has worked and what has not. What are some of the universals that exist and ones that have not? What are the limitations to even modeling reality itself? And those are important questions to be able to answer. And where does meaning come from? Those are some of the other things when you're talking about modeling information. So anyway.
One thing that's important, I think, to recognize too, is that once you own crypto, you become digitally connected with everybody else that owns that particular crypto. You may not know them. In fact, hopefully you probably don't. But your computer knows, the mathematics knows, the digital part of it knows. You have a ledger, essentially. Your computer acts like a ledger. So every transaction creates a digital ledger that goes to everybody that has that part on their computer so that it's recorded. And obviously you couldn't do that if it was physical. There's no way you could do that. But with fast computers, lots of memory, yes.
Lots of energy. That's the key. The energy is always going to be key.
Right.
I mean, that's essentially where you're looking at the barrier at this point.
So that's the reason why nobody can spend a Bitcoin twice, because as soon as you spend a Bitcoin, then your integrity is digitally connected to everybody else that has that type of currency. So that's the way that works. So Stephen, you got your hand up, so go ahead.
Yeah, it's another pointer to what I think is, again, in philosophical again, but that reality is relational. I think we're rapidly moving from more of a classical world way of looking at things to a more, relational. And that was one thing that when I thought about elections, what an inefficient way that we do elections. I mean, have to hire all of these poll workers and people have to go out of their homes, and it just seemed to me that it was fit for the new world that we're looking at. But there's been such reluctance to want to move in that direction with the election officials and things that in the other counties and things that I used to talk to in South Carolina, about this. But I think that's eventually the way it will go, and hopefully it'll bring confidence back to elections, which we have had our election system just trashed of late. And it would, just be the way to go.
Yeah, that's an important point. Even when I went to go vote, I do want to maybe get to Satoshi in a moment, but even when I went to go vote, this is maybe the last presidential election too, but even past few times anyway. One time I colored outside the lines. And they're like, oh, that doesn't count. I'm like, I was like, is this real? I mean, I'm filling out a paper ballot, which, what year is this? And that now we put it through the machine and it records it. And it's like, are you colored outside the lines? And this is really how our election system works. I mean, this is insane. I mean, so the idea that's coming back to the beginning of how this could work for an electoral process is essential. But this is also very important for another reason. There are a lot of people that that are associated with these types of modernization, digitization, and things along those lines that will say that that they fundamentally argue against democracy. And, and that's a problem because now you have somebody that is saying, that they're essentially saying is that, now you can validate everybody's vote, but they don't want that. And so, and there are a lot of tech bros that are in that category. And that's obviously a little bit terrifying. So, it's just something to think about. Not, it's an imminent problem because the coordination that would take in order to,
Joe, I did want to cover.
Yeah, Satoshi.
One of the questions that I brought up is how does government get involved and collect taxes on Bitcoin or crypto coins? So when a crypto is approved, government has a role to play as well. They treat crypto as property. So crypto trades are on the ledger, on the government ledger as well. So they do have a way of detecting when a transaction is made so that if it's a taxable transaction, they can get their cut of the action. So whenever one trade of a cryptocurrency for another is made, it triggers a taxable event. Right. And so that's the way that works. And so China, of course, we talked a little bit about how they're going to get their part. They're experimenting with it in certain cities, but I guess that's the way it's going to work for the United States as well. I haven't researched that very much, but yeah. So
the argument is that these are financial instruments, essentially, that these financial instruments have a price associated with them, so therefore, they get involved in that. Right. The argument has always been is that it's backed by nothing.
Right.
That's really been the argument against digital currencies to begin with. They're like, okay, this is great. You have a bunch of people saying Bitcoin's worth 30,000, 90,000, 200,000, whatever the hell it is at that day.
Yeah.
But there's nothing that's underpinning it. And so really that's where they start to come in. And I think the best way to kind of look at this is that, at this point they're taxing energy. So,
right.
That's what they're really taxing.
Yeah.
And so, the price, the paper is still being used as a way of kind of determining the value of the transactions that are underpinning it. But what's underpinning the transactions is really nothing more than people's trust.
Right.
Yeah.
Not necessarily a government's security of a asset. And so, considering what we have, tell me which one you'd rather pick. Especially when you have 100% of your GDP essentially debt.
Long way from the gold standard, that's for sure.
Yeah, we're at this point, what's the and part of that is, this whole quantitative easing and how these other complex financial instruments work. To Scott's point, there are governments, you just say the emperor has no clothes at some point too. And that's happened throughout history as well. And so, you start looking at it from that perspective, and it starts to get a little bit more, you start to see the revolutionary possibilities that exist with this. But again, all of these are related to physical limitations. And physical limitations essentially being that, how much energy can you allocate? where's it going to come from? And you can't exactly have rolling blackouts with this.
Yeah.
So it starts to get a whole hell of a lot more complex, and when it operates. Yeah, I mean, there could be ways. It's interesting how China's experimenting with it, because they're experimenting with it. You can do it on local levels, and you could almost use a hub and spoke model, so to speak, and start to see how things interconnect on top of little hubs. That's another way of kind of thinking about it that I have, but that I've only thought about it in that way. I haven't really.
Oh, Scott has a way. Go ahead, Scott.